Team Liquid CSGO announced their roster for 2022, and I'm going to be taking a look at the roster changes, the potential roles for these new players, and my overall assessment of their level in the competitive scene. So, with Fallen, Grim, and Stewie 2K out the window, Team Liquid brought back Nitro, brought in a up-and-coming Opera and OC, and brought in an experienced veteran in Shocks. Now, I'm going to be going in order of the player that they brought in, what I think of the player, and then afterwards I will mention some alternatives for said player. First up, I'm going to be taking a look at Nitro. Now, the reason I'm looking at him is first is because he's going to be taking the most important role in the game, the in-game leader role. Now, in 2018, when he had Zeus, well-renowned coach for having strong tactical teams, being a very strong like mental coach in the sense that he can help his players in personal issues and mental issues, was when Nitro had his best time as an in-game leader. That's when he really flourished in that role. That's when he had like great calling. He was able to work really well with Taco as like a support player. Elige was playing his best Counter-Strike at the time, so it was working really well for him. But since then, once Zeus left, they did bring in Stewie 2K, and they did go on to win the Intel Grand Slam, and they won championships after winning the Intel Grand Slam. But I believe that Stewie's natural voice as a second caller or a mid-round caller is what led to Nitro losing some confidence over his own ability as a caller. Maybe Stewie was a bit more vocal, and therefore Nitro felt like he was encroaching upon his, space as the in-game leader, and couldn't ever really take that back. I mean, that's probably why Stewie 2K immediately took the in-game leading role once Nitro left. He just got back from Valorant, so I don't think that he'll have instant impact in the in-game leading role, or in terms of individually as a player, fragging wise, because those two games are very different. So I think he'll need time to adapt, and he'll need time to, get better at the game again. Possibly, learn some new things that he obviously happened over time when he was gone. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, he wasn't really the greatest in-game leaders post the Zeus period because of the fact that Team Liquid played a heavy, they played a really loose style that would, gravitate off, starting off with defaults and mid-rounding, because when you have, Naf as your lurker, Stewie as your entry, Nitro could be your entry, Elige could be your entry, Twists could be your entry, and then the players would mix up roles, so Naf was the lurker, Twists played more of a supportive role, at times Twists, Nitro, or Naf would pick up the op. Obviously, Stewie was entering with supportive utility, and he'd have his teammates backing him up, and they'd play trades. So it was a very, very loose style that would base heavily off defaults, and then mid-rounding off of what the players felt individually. And so that's why I personally don't think that with Nitro as the in-game leader, this team will go far. Personally, for me, I think for this team to function at at an appropriate level with the roles for each one, I think it would be better to have Nitro as the in-game leader and the hard entry of the team. Because I think in that sense it'll free up the capability of the other players around him. So therefore you'll have OC being the opper, Elige will be like the second entry or rifler, Naf will be your lurker or rifler, and then Shocks will be your support player. I think it's integral that, Elige is able to pair up with Nitro, because back in 2016 when they were playing together as mainly an entry duo, that's how they kind of came up together, and obviously Elige gained his name after, Nitro became more of an IGL post 2016. So I think if they're able to kind of at least have that duo in the entry department, I think to an extent this team can function on a role basis. But I do think Nitro's lack of in-game leadership will be what will hold this team back. Personally, for me, alternatives, I thought MSL would be a better idea, because if you took MSL, you could basically build around Elige and Naf, get in like a support player, and then get in, or you could get in actually a hard entry or a support player, and then obviously you could get in a better opper, but I'll talk about that later. You could have gotten Alexi B right before G2 came in and snagged him if Team Liquid made a big enough offer. You could have gotten Magisk, but I think Magisk was aiming to kind of keep with Dupree and Zonic, which I think for Team Liquid would have been better because I think if you had a team of Magisk as your in-game leader, OC as your AWPer, Elige as your second entry, Naf as your lurker, and then Dupree as your hard entry, and then Zonic as the coach, I think that team could actually function at a very, very high level. And then OC's, I guess, lack of experience at Tier 1 could be kind of coated by the experienced players that he has around him. So I think that could have been that could have been a good idea. And so that's why I say I don't think that this move for Nitro to be the in-game leader is a good idea, and I don't think this team will function at a high level with him as the in-game leader. Look, going on to OC. OC will obviously be the AWPer, but I think his current setback is that he hasn't really experienced Tier 1 like on a consistent LAN level. So for him, it's going to be a proving ground again. Team Liquid's going to have to understand that the same way they did with Grim when LAN came back, that they're going to have to give him a bit of time to adjust, and obviously during the online period as well. He obviously has potential. I mean, just based off what I've seen from some games, he has a good mix-up of how he uses his op on the CT side, especially on Inferno. He's willing to be aggressive in apps. He's willing to be aggressive on his own. He's willing to hold down Banana on his own, clear Banana on his own. So he has a good mix-up. He can hold Arch side with the on Inferno for like a whole round and save his utility and then use the utility for a retake. So he has potential for an effective AWPer. But I do think that some alternatives that could have been better for him, players that are proven at Tier 1. I think Cirque, although not consistent, is definitely proven. m0NESY is someone who, just based off what I've seen so far, they're both inexperienced at Tier 1 lands, but m0NESY seems to have much more skill. So in that sense, the supportive elements of the AWPer role wouldn't have to be kind of highlighted that much on m0NESY since it's apparent that his skill level is so high. Kenny S would have been a really good one, an experienced player, especially if you kept around Shocks in this roster. So if you had like Nitro, Kenny S, Elige, Naf, Shocks, I think that could have gone well. You have a very, high-skilled AWPer in Kenny S. Yes, he's dropping off. Yes, he hasn't had the best of performances right before he left G2, but you could say that's because he was getting, maybe the in-game leader wasn't using him right in Nexa. I mean, we've seen already that Nexa isn't the greatest of in-game leaders. He's more of like kind of a mid-round, or he can't necessarily call the right tactics, and he's more of a lurker, so he's not really having like high impact on frags. So I think Kenny S would have been good. Maybe it's like a new change for him. It could have helped with his confidence, meet up with Shocks against someone that he's worked with before. And last but not least, looking at Shocks, I think Shocks, even though he hasn't performed well last year in the like lurk slash supportive role for Vitality, I think he's a very experienced player. He definitely can still kind of pop off. Like he can still have lands or subsets in a year, like times in a year where he can have like a good stretch of performances. He's very experienced in the clutch. He's one of the I think he's either the player that's won the most amount of clutches, or he's like won the most amount of clutches on land. I don't remember the exact statistic. And he can definitely play a supportive element because of the fact that he's so experienced. He's been an in-game leader before, and I think that's something that a lot of kind of support players to an extent have to have. They have to have an understanding of the game. They have to have an understanding of how their team plays, how the IGL likes to call, to be able to play off of what the IGL needs, what the team needs. So I think to an extent Shocks can do that. I think possibly the only thing I'm worried about is the fact that he himself has a vocal voice. He likes to he likes to be in charge, or in some cases, if he feels like he needs to be in charge, he will do it. So that's a possible Stewie 2K Part 2 if Shocks feels like Nitro can't do the job. But some alternatives for him is I would have liked to see Amanek. If you're going to go for a French support player, Amanek would have been great. He's been performing well for G2. He's been filling every role needed. Apparently, he's been doing a lot of micromanaging on G2's T-sides, which to an extent is what an IGL is supposed to do. So already you can see how Nex is kind of taking away from Amanek's credit. So I think Amanek would have been a great replacement if you're going to go for a French player, especially since G2 seemed to be pushing him on the way out of the door. And as I said earlier, just specifically I'm mentioning it again, I think Dupree would have been a great player instead of Shocks, not necessarily for the supportive element, but to fill out the full-on entry element if Magisk and Zonic were to have joined the team. Magisk would be your IGL, and I guess support player, or Naf would be the supportive player, as well as the lurker, and then Magisk would be the in-game leader. OC would still be your AWPer, Elige as your second entry, and then Zonic as your coach. To mention this, I think Team Liquid not going for a better coach is obviously a huge disappointment. I think I don't like the fact that Adren has come into Team Liquid again and has shown that he's not really able to help his players. He's not a good man manager. And I think in a coach, you need a good man manager to be able to succeed on any level. If you can't man manage the differences between players, the understanding of the game between players, egos, personalities, things like that, then you might as well be the strategic or the analyst of the team. I think it would have been cool to see Zeus come back to Team Liquid and Adren be the strategic coach, because Elysian, Nitro, and Naf all have great relationships with Zeus. They all liked him. They all have had great praise for him. I think if you were able to get him back, he can work with a player like OC and help develop him. I think Zeus could have been great for this Team Liquid team. I don't know if they offered for him because there's no like reports, and I myself am not really well connected in the scene. So I think it would have been cool to see a change in the coaching position. I don't doubt that Adren has great strategic understanding and tactical understanding, but I think as a coach for someone who needs man management and things like that, I think you need someone like a Zeus, Xtaz, Malek. I think it would have been great to see a change also in the coaching position. And lastly, I don't think this team will be a contender. They definitely will not be a top 5 team. Nitro coming back will automatically guarantee them outside of the top 5. OC being an inexperienced opera will guarantee them outside of the top 5. And Shox being the supportive element, I think it helps, but obviously the language barrier could prove detrimental. I don't think it will because Shox can't speak English. So I do think that this team will be a good team. They won't be a contender. They will make playoffs. They just simply won't be a contender. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let me know if you think. Let me know if you have any other alternatives for the positions, because I think I may have honestly missed out on some players. It's just that everything was I'm trying to come up with like all the alternatives and kind of like what other kind of style of teams I would have liked to see with the other players that I mentioned. If you like the video, if you like Valorant, check out my other videos. If you like CS gameplay, check out my other my videos that I did. If you like Warzone, check out those videos. If you like football, check out my football videos. Follow me in my links below, and thanks for watching.